My friend and I got an Airbnb to this mountain house in Bloomingburg, New York, to do some mushrooms and enjoy the forest. It, from the outside perspective, seemed like a great getaway with even more things to do in the surrounding areas. The Airbnb host was highly rated, 4.9 stars, with 450 plus glowing reviews about the house and the trails in the state forest across the road. The house was normally $300 a night, but it was down to $75. It was a spontaneous trip that we threw together within a week. Not much forethought. We thought a lot more about what we needed for our shrooms trip and being on the hiking trails. This was a grave mistake. I had a bad feeling the night before we left that I couldn't shake, but eventually got to bed. I only slept about 4 hours, but thought to myself in the morning that I was psyching myself out and that everything would be fine. We arrived a few hours prior to check-in and placed our food in the basement fridge before we headed out onto the trails. The house from the outside looked old but not horrible. We were pleased at this point as the sun was coming out and it looked beautiful. We spoke with the host on the phone about the local area and he sent us a Google Doc with all the trails, how far they were, and some off-trail destinations that he provided images and directions to. He claimed that he grew up in the area and was pushing for us to go to this lake 4 miles down along the state forest border. He also said to us that we may run into some locals and to tell them Brandon sent you and you'll be good. One of the first red flags. I called him, and after almost 20 minutes of oversharing about his personal connection to the home, he finally provided me with a map, location, and directions to this lake. We hadn't actually gone inside the main part of the house yet and decided to head on our way there. As we were entering, there was an Asian man parked in the lot by the trailhead. He was old and sitting on a stool, inscribing a parchment with symbols. We didn't think much of it and continued on. At the first place we found, we sat down and took our shrooms and tried to mentally prepare. We were looking for the lake for about an hour, but the host's directions were misleading, and we weren't sure where we were. The images led us to a fork in the trail that led into a densely wooded area. He told me on the phone when we had reached this point to go left off the main trail for about 2 miles. I know enough about hiking to know that this is a dumb idea, especially on shrooms. So we turned around and headed back to a beautiful waterfall that we saw about 2 miles from the entrance. We spent about an hour there, barefoot in the stream that fed into the waterfall. The shrooms kicked in and it was fun, but we both kind of felt like we were being watched. There were ominous undertones and the sun started to fade, so we thought that we should head back to the house, check in, regroup, and plan out the rest of the day. We arrived back at the entrance to see the Asian man sitting there like a statue, and I was uncomfortable, so I decided to try and be polite and say hello. He slowly turns to me blank-faced, stares at me, and then looks back down at his parchment. We both look at each other like, okay, let's go, and walked over to the house, which was across the street. We entered the house to a high-style ranch setup where the front immediately feeds into 2 staircases, one's going up on the right and one going down on the left. As I look down, I see a door leading to what seemed like the ground level, with multiple locks on it that said private, taped onto it with parchment paper. This was incredibly unnerving, and I immediately felt uncomfortable in the home. The air felt strange and heavy. Everything was coated in a layer of dust, despite the cleaning lady being in there while we were gone. While once we went up the stairs to our left, there was a long hallway to our right. The hallway had many doors, some without knobs, and it felt like something you would see in a horror movie. The bedrooms were Victorian style with very old bedding and woodwork. Everything about this place screamed murder house, and we decided to go back out into the camping area and think about what we wanted to do. As we were sitting outside, I began to get an overwhelming feeling that I was being watched again. My hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I heard something in the woods about 20 yards away from us. We saw a deer about 10 minutes prior, and my friend said that it was probably that, and continued to play music on his speaker to calm down. I tried to calm him down, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I told him to turn it down. I took out my hunting knife and I looked around. As I'm looking, I hear more rustling in the woods. At this point, I was thoroughly spooked and told my friend to go get his stuff. I didn't care how high I was. I needed to get the heck out of there immediately. As we were leaving, I realized that the entire ground level windows around the sides of the house were blacked out and boarded up. I wasn't sure if somebody was watching us from the house or the woods, but I didn't want to find out. It also occurred to me that the man we saw in the entrance was only about 50 yards away from us. We hastily threw our stuff into the car and pulled off. As I was driving off, the Asian man was no longer sitting in his stool and his car was empty. He had disappeared. Thank God we stuck with our gut and didn't go to the lake. I was having trouble reading the map on shrooms, but upon later inspection, there was no lake anywhere to be found. Not only this, but we realized many of the reviews on his accounts were fake, and some of the pictures were too. I still wonder who we would have run into if we would have made it to the lake. The host told us we would likely run into people and to make sure to say that he sent us. But luckily, I never found out. Considering we were on shrooms, I tried to reanalyze the situation to see if there were any points where I may have just been having a bad trip. In retrospect, I think my senses were even more heightened to the bad energy of that place, and I'm glad that I trusted my intuition. It was July 1st. Everyone in my family, including family friends, went to see the fireworks in our local town. We live in Canada and have been celebrating Canada Day before I was born. 3 years ago is when this happened. They all left for fireworks and I decided I wanted to stay home. It was around 8 o'clock, which was fairly dark out, since the summers around here are usually bright until late into the night. My house is one story. My room is in the front of the house with a window showing the road, and we also have a big long deck from my window to the other side of the house. My room is set up where my bed is horizontally next to my window. My gaming console and TV are not facing the window, but are next to it as well. I was playing a video game, and next I hear a weird thud. And then again and again this same thud keeps coming closer to my window. As this thud gets closer, I hear a cough. I once thought that it was an animal, but I'm now certain it was a man since I can hear his deep cough. I'm staring at my window, frozen in fear, when I see a man dressed in all black, wearing a big black jacket. The man is fairly older, since he has gray hair and a gray beard. He smiles at me as I snack back to reality and take my phone and run to my parents' room to wait to call the police. And they never found this man, but even 4 years later, this still freaks me out. This happened just last night, and I'm really confused and don't know what to make of it. I was smoking a cigarette out of my window and was in a relaxed mood. I live in a very large, wooded area with a large lot and lots of wetlands and forest around the edges. I looked out the window up from my phone and saw a shimmer from the back of the woods, coming out of the trail that we had back there maybe 100 yards away. It looked like something walking on all fours for the first part, and then it stood upright and got right behind a very large, wide tree in the middle of the yard. I turned on my phone light and I believe that that's why it hid behind the tree. I quickly turned up my phone light brightness and had my fiancé shine a flashlight out the window. And then maybe 10 feet up the tree, I saw what looked like a triangular head peek around and look at the lights shining on it. It was only for a split second, but it freaked me out due to how tall it was. I instantly was very scared, and I shut the windows and curtains. Later on, my fiancée woke me up and said she thought she saw someone standing in the tall reeds right outside my window. I looked with a light again, but couldn't really tell if something was there because the reeds are very thick. I went back out there in the morning and found a piece of a rubber beach ball and a woman's Venus brand razor behind the tree. This is all just very odd to me, and I wanted to see if anyone had any experiences with this. This happened last autumn. I was hiking by myself, as I usually do, in a state forest near where I live that I heard was a nice secluded place to enjoy a walk in the woods. It was a gorgeous fall afternoon. The sky was a lovely blue with a few clouds. The sun was warm, and there was a slight breeze. When I walked down to a large pond, I could hear birds in the trees and a group of people talking and laughing on the far side of this pond. An occasional prop airplane passed overhead. I walked on a trail along a small ridge above one side of the pond. I got to the far side of the pond after about half an hour of meandering, and the trail just disappeared. I reasoned with myself that as long as I stayed within sight of the pond, I couldn't get too lost. And so I wandered into the woods a bit deeper to get around a marshy area and continued on my way. After a few minutes, I came out of the trees onto the edge of the pond. I crept close to the edge of the water to see what I could see, and then it hit me. It was absolutely silent. I got goosebumps and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. There wasn't a single other sound besides my breathing. No birds and no bugs and no people. Not even a hint of a breeze. I slowly turned around to face the trees that I had just emerged from. I had the vague idea that when the forest goes completely silent, it means that there's some sort of predator around. I looked through the trees. I didn't see anything, but I was filled with dread and feeling very uneasy. I realized I didn't have any cell service, and no one knew that I was hiking in this forest. I had about 3 hours of daylight left. At this point, I thought I was roughly halfway around the pond. I didn't want to go back the way that I came, because that gave me bad feelings. I knew I couldn't stay where I was, so that only left going forward. After 5 minutes, the normal forest sounds returned and stayed, but I was on edge the rest of the hour and a half that it took me to get back to my car. I hike by myself all the time, and I have never been afraid in a forest before. But that one, I was convinced I was going to die in that forest that afternoon. I still have no idea what was in there with me, and I have refused to go back. These stories all happened to me at a popular national park. They are true, and while they might not be the craziest stories out there, I find them interesting. The first story starts with me trekking into the desert on my own. In my mid-20s, I started to camp and hike alone quite a bit, and when I hiked, I would seek as remote of a location as possible. I'm a 5'5" petite female and honestly made some dumb decisions, wearing headphones while wandering terrain alone, but I had a lot of fun and have since gotten smarter about handling myself in the wilderness. I had hopped in my car and headed to the desert as I often do, and picked a spot to park where there were no cars, tourists, people of any sort. I grabbed my pack and headphones and excitedly hopped out of the car to go off and explore and climb some rocks in the distance. I'm feeling good until I get not even a mile out, and I see this huge bullet in the dirt. My dad, who was law enforcement and was a National Guard, later said the way I described the size, it had to be from a grounded gun, and there was no way anyone could just walk through the desert with this type of weapon. Something about it unsettled me, and I didn't know if I should bring it to the ranger or what. I felt weird taking it with me, so I ended up awkwardly burying it and moving on. For whatever reason, it put me in an intense unease. I felt jumpy and jarred. None of the usual relaxation I have on my tracks. A few steps later, I hear the weirdest noise I've ever heard in my entire life. It was this high-pitched, buzzing electric noise that just encompassed the space around me. Now, if you know the desert, you know the acoustics can sometimes get weird since noise bounces off of rocks. But this was akin to nothing that I've heard, and my instinctual reaction was a sheer panic. I fumble for my phone and surprisingly have reception. So I call my then boyfriend and he tells me it's probably nothing, and that I should go and enjoy myself. I take a few more steps and the noise instantly starts again, louder, and my body is screaming to hightail it back to the car, which I do. I'm stumbling over myself and back on the phone with my boyfriend, feeling like I'm being chased. I make it back and feel a rush of relief as I get in my car. I know this might sound anticlimactic, but the amount of fear I felt in that moment is something that I've never felt before or since. It felt like a warning of sorts to stay the heck away. I strongly believe in intuition, so I trust in my gut that it was not anything good. I'm hoping someone has experienced something similar or has insight. I've yet to Google anything useful. Story 2 takes place at the same national park. One thing I love about this park is there's a fairly decent chance you'll see weird stuff in the sky at night. I attribute it to the fact that there is a military test pilot base fairly close by. But what you see is some really strange phenomena. This was the most interesting one I've seen. The openness of the desert makes it easy to see the beautiful night sky above you. One particular night, I look up and I see some objects flying high up and off in the distance. If I remember correctly, one was white and one was red. They moved in strange formations and at paces too fast for any aerial physics that I know of. I can't imagine the G-force involved, or how we could have technology that allows for speed that fast. I'm in awe watching this for a while, them zipping around, and to make things even more baffling, they moved in diagonal lines at certain points, like literally making acute angle turns on a hairpin. They would also sometimes pause and suspend, and then zip around more. The final spectacular was when I start to see them fly towards each other, and seemingly merge into one object. It then changes color. I can't remember what one, but it changed. This now singular object shines a little brighter and then slowly fades out to nothing. I'm sure that I'm missing a few details, but it was one of the most bizarre and amazing things that I've ever seen. Again, I'm guessing that it's probably military related, so either they have some crazy aerial technology, or they're in cahoots with extraterrestrial. The last story is more of an annoyance. I had found some rocks on a main trail, where someone had performed some type of ritual. While I'm not necessarily against the occult, but there was what looked like red there, and that I was absolutely not okay with that. Probably just some dumb kids trying to be cool. But yeah, overall, I love nature and the desert in particular. It holds a very special and magical place in my heart. Anyways, thanks for listening to my stories and stay safe out there.